Did I frighten you?
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with my review of Snow White 2025 edition, or Disney's Snow White, as the full title goes. A movie that is arriving with a lot of pre-hate, and not the pre-hate that you might think it would get, which is just the fact that, people are pretty cynical, and some people are just kind of tired of these remakes Disney has done of their animated classics as live-action films. But a lot of different, more pointed pre-hate going on for years now, because this movie took quite a while to get to the screen. And there was just a lot of things about Rachel Zegler and her casting, and the fact that she was not a white actress playing the role. That was just sort of crappy and stupid. And then about her as a fan of the original Snow White, and if she's a big enough fan, if she knows it well enough, that was really kind of being perpetuated and certainly amplified by people that you knew didn't really care about the original Snow White and were not, arguing in good faith and making a real fan argument as much as just kind of the pile on her. So all that being said, the movie's finally here, and it's fine. It's kind of middle of the road for these remakes that Disney has done, which I don't hate like some people. I think, they're pretty cynically driven. I remember talking to someone who said, oh man, they're trying to replace their animated movies or classic animated movies with these new versions. I'm like, well, they're not trying to replace them, because even when they make $1 billion, like Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast, then they just go back to the merchandise from the original version. So it's still cynical, of course, because it's just like, oh, we're using this title that you love to make this new version. But at the end of the day, it exists, but so does the original, and the original is going to be what's the most beloved revisited version. And some of them I think have been good. Jungle Book was great. I thought Aladdin was pretty fun, actually. And then some of them are pretty terrible, like Lion King, which I know wasn't live action, but you know what I mean. And Pinocchio. This one it's just okay. It's got its moments, though. And I think the best thing about it is Rachel Zegler, which I kind of expected going in, because she's a wonderful musical theater actress, and she's an amazingly talented singer, and she has the right sort of, vibe for this kind of material. And she sort of exudes Disney princess energy, and that's what you want here. The movie's strange, though, because it is remaking such a old film that is very dated. And it's not bad to say that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is dated. It's of its time, and we can love it, and we can see what an important, lovely movie it is, and also say, yeah, it's of the era it was made. But when you're doing a remake now, that means you're going to want to change things and update things, and I think that is where it gets tricky, because do you kind of get super self-aware? Do you maybe get even meta, or do you, really switch things up so it doesn't even feel the same? And the first half of this movie, maybe the first third, somewhere in between there, was surprisingly earnest and straightforward. And I admired the approach, even though it also inevitably led to some cheesiness to the movie. Because when you have a movie that is so talking about being, virtuous and good and standing up for the right thing, and you're not in any way sort of winking or having fun with it, like we see in recent years with everything from Enchanted to even Frozen, where it's like the characters get to be different than a classic Disney princess. But this one is embracing very old school vibes. And yes, some of that works, but a lot of it is kind of, okay, this is pretty silly. But if you're a kid, I think this is sweet and fine. And when Rachel Zegler sings, it's great, because it's great to hear her sing. And I think the new songs are a mixed bag, but I do like some of them. She gets some great moments to shine with those songs. But then you get to the Seven Dwarfs at all, and it's an element that I think has had people rightfully very wary of this movie, because we haven't seen a lot of them in the advertising, but when we do, they don't look great, and they don't look great in the movie either. They hit that uncanny valley thing. I wish they'd figured out just a different way to do them. I know it's a sensitive subject. I know it's like, okay, should we just cast little people as these characters? And then the movie itself sort of really does posit them as fantasy characters. Like, they refer to Snow White and the others as human, so they are dwarfs in the in the fantasy realm. Okay, well then could we still have cast humans of people and done something with prosthetics? Or if they are digital, is there a different look? Because the look that they settled on just, it looks off. And they didn't use AI to make them. They used just traditional computer graphics, but they look like if you told AI to turn the Seven Dwarfs from the animated movie into real people, what would that look like? You know, there's something off about them. They're on screen enough that you can kind of get used to them, but I also was always aware that, like, when you see a close up of Dopey smiling into the camera, smiling sweetly at Snow White, it's often like, oh, that's a nice moment for Dopey. Also, I don't quite like how Dopey looks. He's a little creepy. So yeah, that doesn't quite gel. The movie opens up the story in a lot of ways, which are very understandable because of the way that the story played out in the original. When you think about Snow White's role in the third act, you definitely would want to switch things up again if you're making it 2025 and maybe you want to do a little more with your title character. And yeah, it's again some of those things I thought were fun or fine. They give her a love interest who is so different than Prince Charming. This is just like an completely different character, this character named Jonathan, and they're bantering, their sort of will they won't they tension is interesting because the movie takes this shift in its second half where it does get a little more sort of modern feeling, or a little more, I don't know, not winking, it's never meta, but it just has a different vibe than the first half. And part of that is this relationship, because they have almost like a Han and Leia, we're arguing all the time because really we're into each other thing. And sometimes there's some cuteness there, but sometimes it didn't quite feel Snow White, which is to say the character in the first half is portrayed just sort of has this sweet, earnest, forthright girl. And I almost kind of wish they just stuck to their guns on that, instead of kind of making her a little more sassy, openly sassy in the second half. I don't think they quite needed that. But also it would take a very specific tone to nail what I'm talking about, which is to be, earnest and open and, see the world through such a optimistic place and feel right. But I think you can, but I don't think they quite had faith. And then, so they sort of switched up. Mark Webb is the director, and he's done some good stuff. And he, I liked the first Amazing Spider-Man. Didn't like the second one so much. I liked 500 Days of Summer, but I don't think he quite nailed tonally the right approach here. And I don't know exactly what that is, because again, I think you do have to approach Snow White delicately, and you don't want to turn it into Snow White and the Huntsman, the movie with Kristen Stewart, because it's like, okay, well, that wouldn't feel right for the Disney version. She can't turn full action hero, but you also want to see her do a little more than she did in the original. And I think they thread that pretty well with some of her actions in the final act of the film, because they do get her to do more than she did in the original without turning, Snow White badass action hero. She has to use her mind and her heart more than she has to use, like, suddenly she's using kung fu on these guys. So that's good. Then you have Gal Gadot as the evil queen, and I do wish someone else had been cast in this role, because I think she is trying for the right thing, which is she's trying for a very campy, mannered performance. Like, how do you play one of the most famous Disney villains who is just sort of evil incarnate? Evil is literally part of her character name. You lean into it, right? And you just go for it. But she feels stilted and just not clicking with what she's doing. It's like she's going big, but she doesn't have the right vibe. It's like, I was imagining what someone like, say, Parker Posey, or, there's a million other people I can think of who was like really kind of, you felt, or completely not in on the joke, because I think Gal Gadot is aware that what she should be doing is this big over the top thing. I just don't think she has the right energy for it. There's something that just doesn't feel right about when she's trying to go this big and outrageous and turn towards the camera and turn and scream at people. And it just kind of plays false, instead of like, hey, we're having fun here. Isn't it fun that I'm going so big with this big character. The rest of the cast is all fine. I don't think anyone really pops though, except for Rachel Zegler, who just is the theater kid energy she exudes. Theater kids are not a bad thing. I went to Emerson College. Some of my best friends are theater kids. No, she just has that it factor, but she also has that right energy. It's like, yes, she was born to play this sort of role, and I think is a great part of the movie. It's so great to have her playing this part. That's why it's so crappy that she got all this hate for it. But the movie itself is messy. And parts of it I think are fun, and once in a while there would be like a little poignant beat that I was like, oh, that's nice. Like it's a nice little moment here they have between the characters. But then other parts felt it's like they were trying and not quite landing. Look, I'll give them this. It's not that it's the hardest thing to do, but to think about, well, who's the fairest of them all? Well, there's multiple meanings to the word fair, isn't there? And that Snow White can exude fairness in her own way. Why not lean into that? Why not go with that? But yeah, at the end of the day, it just feels like this one, they never quite nailed what was the right thing to do to capture that spirit of Snow White and modernize it, but don't modernize it too much, or you're not feeling like Snow White. And I think what they have is fine, and I think it works for kids. It seemed like the kids that were in the audience I saw it with were definitely enjoying it, and I enjoyed aspects of it, but it would be a very mild, like, hey, this is sort of for the hardcore Disney enthusiasts, or the people who just really want to see all these adaptations. And look, the Lilo and Stitch trailer is already out, and I think that movie is going to go over extremely well, just based on the reaction to the trailer. So it's not like these are over, but I think it's a lot harder with the true old school, nearly 100-year-old classics than the ones that were kind of the 90s on, where there was already a more modern sensibility to them. So those are my thoughts on Snow White, or Disney's Snow White, which is going to be in theaters this weekend. Thanks, guys. If you can like and you can subscribe and all that great stuff, that would be great. Take care.